Hello.
My name is Ashley Kolodziej, and I'm UX and Product Design Lead here at Boston University.
And my name is Steve Rudolfi, and I'm a senior web developer at Boston University.
We work in marketing and communications, and we're super excited to tell you all about frameworks today.
Yay!
So let's get started. So here in Let's Just Build It, 7 years of framework development at Boston University. This is a slightly development-focused presentation. We do talk about Sass and JavaScript and PHP and all the inner workings of frameworks, but we're going to try not to get too technical if we can. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the Ask a Question section under the video for the Q&A time at the end, or in the WPC Online Slack room if we run out of time later on today. Or feel free to tweet at us anytime if none of those options work out for you.
So before we get into the intricate details of WordPress theme frameworks, we want to just paint what we mean when we say framework. So we consider it a WordPress theme that serves as a fully functional theme that can be applied to any site, that also has configuration options, either through the customizer, options pages, or page templates and meta boxes. And then it can also serve as a parent theme that you can build child themes from. So why use a framework? Well, here's the reasons we've attributed to our framework success. It speeds up future design and development, protects your brand, lets you focus on the interesting problems instead of rebuilding the wheel every time. Feature planning enhancements become streamlined, and it makes maintenance easier. After you've developed your framework, everything just plain runs more smoothly. And not that much more work than creating a custom theme from scratch, as long as you keep a few things in mind as you plan your framework. And hopefully the rest of this talk will help illustrate this.
So why build it then? I mean, there's so many frameworks out there, so many options you can choose from. Why on earth would you go through all of this work just to build a whole framework yourself? And what that really comes down to is that you get to control your own destiny. Personally, I'm a control freak, so this part really appeals to me. Everything is in your hands, everything from plugins to maintenance to the user experience to any new features you might add, especially in university situations. We often find that we need very particular features to support our faculty and our staff who need very specific sorts of things. So frameworks are great for that. That said, everything is in your hands. So you're responsible for the plugins, the maintenance, the user experience, and the features. And you're also responsible for if it turns into a monster, you kind of have to clean that up and maintain it and make sure everything's running smoothly. So
is building a framework right for you? You really have to decide, is it right for me? Is it right for my team? Is it right for my clients and anyone who's going to use it? At BU, we have a dedicated IT team for infrastructure, server maintenance, WordPress core maintenance, and all that good stuff we don't really want to have to deal with when we want to focus on the framework itself. We also had a passionate team that recognized the need and could voice a justification for the upfront time effort. So then you have to start asking yourself a few questions. Are you large enough? Do you need a custom framework to manage one or a handful of sites? Probably not. This is really geared toward, maybe multi-site, or if you have a lot of custom themes, a lot of unique design features, functionality between the sites. So at last count, we had 2,707 sites within WordPress at BU. In terms of our framework, that's currently 70 live sites using the responsive framework out of the box. 73 sites in staging that are ready to go live, or getting ready to go live using the responsive framework out of the box, and 39 custom child themes based on the framework. So we have a couple key WordPress environments, and there are more than this, but these are the ones that we deal with, on an everyday basis. Production, test, staging, and development. Test is where we do a lot of the plugins and maintenance testing before things go into production, and staging is where clients do content entry before the site gets pushed live. And development, we all have shared and personal sandboxes. So our friends at ISNT created a nice clone tool to manage content for all of these environments. The clone tool only goes down the chain. So you can move content from production into test or staging, or from production into development, or staging or test into development. The one thing it does not do is bring content up the chain to protect against oopses. We don't want any test content, any lorem ipsum, any of that accidentally getting cloned from development up into production. So the bottom line here is have an awesome relationship with your friends at ISNT so they can do all the cool stuff and that you don't want to.
All the hard work.
All the hard work.
So how do you develop 188 WordPress themes? Well, you just code them and code them and code them and code them, and you just do it all, right? No, we want to avoid that. This is what it was like for a while before we got into framework development. We just had themes sort of everywhere, and we kind of did things here and there, and things would be repeated or done this way or done that way. And we built a framework to avoid that. So our first framework was Flexi, and it was great. It was in 2010. We managed the CSS and PHP together, just like you would expect for a framework. And that'll come up again later. But for the time, it was really great. It currently powers 87 different custom themes and 182 non-custom sites. So there's actually still a lot of people on it, even though we've moved past this framework. In the past, we could not exclude parts of CSS. You had to override. And then you had sort of these custom responsive sites that popped up over time as responsive became more of a thing, and we found we needed to support it. About a year later, mobile was really coming into play, and we realized that we really needed a mobile presence on our sites. So we had Flexi Mobile, and at the time it made sense for us to do a separate mobile site. That was kind of the thing that was going on there. So the way that we structured this was that we had what I believe was a plugin that activated a theme. I could be wrong on that. I'm not 100% clear on how it works. But what would happen is you would have an actual separate custom theme for each theme that would handle the mobile site. So Flexi Mobile currently does 20 custom themes, and it's active on 84 non-custom sites. So again, a lot of people still using it. But the big thing that was sort of a problem here is that anytime a change happened or a bug was found in a child theme, you had to fix it in the child's mobile theme too. And that's a lot of overhead. That got really tough just because people would make a change in one place and forget to make it in the other. It got out of hand real quickly. So in 2013, we took a look at all this and said, okay, we could be doing this a little better. Responsive web design was really sort of out at the forefront, and people were really talking about it, and mobile first design, and we said, okay, that's the way we're going to go for this new framework that we put together. And that framework is responsive. That is the framework we are currently on today and that we currently actively develop. Now, responsive does a couple of things differently that we'll talk about extensively throughout this presentation. It manages SAS and JavaScript and front-end assets separately from the PHP. So even though those come together to make a whole theme later on, we have those managed in separate repos. The other thing that it does is responsive and desktop styles at the same time from the very beginning. So we launched it maybe like 2 years ago. It took a while to get it running.
Yep. And
it currently powers 39 custom themes and 70 non-custom sites. Another thing that we integrated in this version was that we really wanted to make it easier to pick and choose what you want, both from the developer side and from the client side.
So now we're going to quickly dive through some examples of the functionality and live sites taking advantage of our framework. So this is out-of-the-box responsive framework. We have some layout options that deal with changing the menu and branding layout, some on the side, some on the top. And then we start going into font options, which you can see the title, the headlines, and the paragraph text change. And then we start getting into font palette or color palettes. So these are site-wide changes. So then we start getting into adjusting colors within the palettes, changing, just links within the widget sidebar or minor differences. And we also have photo layouts where it can be the full width of the content, full width of the window instead of just the content.
And you can see that after all this is starting to look like a real site, especially compared to what you saw immediately out of the box. That level of customization is what allows us to have a very large variety of sites working on the same framework throughout the university.
Mm-hmm. So here's some websites that are made with the framework with extra custom CSS entered through a plugin via the admin, not child themes. So, we start off with some very simple changes, moving the page title over the image, some featured buttons, and everything's getting a little bit more complex, adding CSS. And then we get into custom child themes. This is the archaeology website, and you see, the design is getting a little more intense. And then we start doing things like custom maps that are powered by a custom host type for the locations and images and all of that. And then we start making content entry easier for these banners that have, interesting color changes and buttons and all of that. Then we get to more and more edgy design and layouts, different header bars, search expansion, all of that. We have interactivity with a pathfinder that displays degree results based on chosen interest checkboxes. We have this is Question, where we do some very interesting things, pushing our calendar far, as well as colors by section. You look on the left menu, so you can easily understand where you are within the site just by color hues. And then our research support site, which has a slightly modified menu system, as well as lots and lots of type ahead searches to help you find and parse through documents and materials. And we also have different, I guess we call them micro frameworks of sorts. One of those is our editorial channels. So Bostonia, this is research, and the foundation, which actually we'll get into later, is a portion of our framework that helps to power our features. This helps us build these, immersive, feature-rich articles very quickly. And we also have a BU Today app, which our friends at IS&T also developed, and that uses the WordPress API to pull content from editorial channels. And finally, we have a digital signage framework. And sorry, this picture was taken on a very overcast day, but what this equates to is digital signage and what we call slides that rotate throughout the day that is all powered by WordPress on the back end and custom post types.
This is one of my favorites because it gets out of the computer screen and out of websites and does something really, really different. So it's a pretty cool example of how you can use frameworks outside of just, websites. So many of us are developers here, and after all this show and tell, I won't keep you waiting. I'm sure you're all wondering, what about me? How do we actually build these things? Well, what this looks like is, as I said, responsive is actually a tale of two repositories. One, the framework, the base theme. This is what handles all of the WordPressy stuff. So all the PHP is in here. There's JavaScript for the customizer in here. There's a little bit of CSS and Sass to help style that. But primarily, this is all responsible for handling content in the admin area and all of those WordPress things that you love. The second half of our framework is called Foundation. This is all the front end stuff, the things that sort of make the site work and make it look pretty. So the vast majority of our Sass and JavaScript all lives in here. And these two things come together for major releases. So every time we do a major release, we pair a version of the framework with a version of Foundation. And later on down the line, after a major release happens, we might do a couple of child themes, say the School of Education child theme and the Research Support child theme. These would inherit, just like you would expect with any other child theme, from the framework. In the meantime, while we're doing that, we're actually always working on Foundation. So while the School of Education is going on, we might fix a bug with navigation or improve grid classes. Now, in the olden days, the School of Education, back before we had this sort of versioning process where we managed PHP and SAS and JavaScript separately, would have had to get all the stuff that was in the current major release of Foundation. But because we manage those separately, we can actually go straight from the School of Education to the latest version of Foundation that's being worked on. So School of Education would get that bug fix with navigation, and research support would get those improved grid classes right away instead of having to wait for us to go through a release process. The other great thing that this means is that when we do bring those changes back up into Foundation, because our child themes are at a very specific point in our front-end library, we don't have to worry about affecting those things. So our testing is a lot more limited. We don't have to worry about child themes as much when we update Foundation because it's sort of our option. It's on our timeline when we want to update them. And of course, you're all wondering what the secret to this is, right? We use Bower for this. Bower is a package manager, I suppose. The big thing that it does for us is that it says that we can go grab a very particular version of our front-end assets from Git. So you'll notice here that here's a very simple little bower.json file. And it says the name of the theme, in this case, our School of Education. And it says, okay, I'm dependent on 1.4.0, this version of Responsive Foundation. That's sort of the magic that lets us say, okay, you are stopped in this point at time, and we're going to update you when we're ready, but not before then. That's what allows us to keep iterating on the framework so quickly. Of course, not to mention a number of other tools, including Node Package Manager, Grunt, GitHub, SCSS Lint and Code Climate are really good for enforcing your coding standards. Those we're sort of just getting in there, and we're really excited about them. And it's not mentioned here, but I would also recommend Nerf guns. They're great for productivity.
Seconded. So a little more about why we did it and behind the scenes. We mostly did it for developers and to speed up development and streamline that. But everything we do is with clients in mind. So clients like smaller price tags, quicker timelines. So less development time on their site means smaller price tags, happier clients, happier developers, happier everyone. So another way we do that is with meta boxes. So we really try and use meta boxes to put the keys in the hands of the users. They make sites and content easier to edit and maintain without technical knowledge. And there's usually less opportunities for failure. If there's any downsides, it's more development work up front. And then the clients get locked in. When they are signing off on intricate designs, and we build them meta boxes for those specific designs, they're locked in for a time. They can add and change them at their whim, but they cannot totally change and overhaul that content area. So in that case, adding or changing them requires a little bit more dev work. So let's start by looking at this site. It is the College of Engineering, and let's focus on those 3 hexagons there. So that's obviously client editable content. And back before we had any frameworks and really any plugins to help us do this, we would write that markup in the content area and try to instruct the clients as much as we can to not change things that would break everything, but that's not always the case. So after going through that for a few years, we started using WordPress default meta boxes to make things a little bit more easier for them to edit. So instead of a whole bunch of ugly markup, they can have explicit text boxes to enter things in, like title, number. We give them drop downs, radio buttons, checkboxes, everything that'll help them make their content entry easier with as little room for failure as possible. So the other part of what helps make frameworks great for us is allowing the developers to customize at a child theme level. So we utilize a couple things, and this isn't an extensive list, but these are things that really help us out a lot. So obviously the meta boxes, But we get to know WordPress as in depth as we possibly can. So we use the WordPress template hierarchy. Since the responsive framework itself is a fully working out-of-the-box theme, it has all the files and functions necessary to make you have it power a full website with all of our plugins that we could possibly need. So that the child theme only has to override maybe a template or two in order to customize the site heavily. We use filters a lot, so one of those, for example, is the view branding, which you'll see at the bottom right corner of the screen. It's sometimes the view logo, sometimes it is words with the logo in the footer. There's a lot of different options, but occasionally we run into situations where we have to make completely customized branding for them. In that case, we're going to use a filter to easily override that in the output instead of modifying template parts. And with template parts, we use get template part as much as possible. So we break code down into easily digestible chunks that are easily repeatable with inside loops. And for any plugins we use, and we're calling functions from them within a theme, we always want to make sure we use if function exists to make sure that that is available in case plugins get deactivated or updated, and that way nothing breaks on the front end of the website.
Now, as far as the SaaS goes, which I'm sure you guys are all absolutely clamoring over to hear, we've made that really easy for developers to override and customize using only the parts you need to. So our SaaS structure is actually broken out into two parts. The first is birth base. So this is your boilerplate CSS, your basic HTML tag styling, mix-ins, variables, things that make it easier to build a site from scratch, but do not involve any actual styling or layouts or fonts or anything like that. The second half of it is birth theme. And this is all, again, where the WordPressy stuff lies, the styling lies. So you get things like layouts, colors, font options are defined in here. Styling for WordPress, styling for plugins or shortcodes or anything you might add in a theme like that. And variables for changing these things as well. The beauty of dividing these two up is that you can just pull birth base if you like, and say you're building an editorial article or a site that's off of WordPress. You don't have any CSS you don't need. So we can actually keep our front-end code base consistent regardless of the type of project or what we're building it on. Similarly, if you're building a custom theme, you can choose just to pull in a couple of things. So say you don't need layouts and colors and font options. You know exactly what you're doing with the theme, and you've defined a very specific layout and branding setup. Then you only have to pull in a couple things. Or you can, just as usual, pull in the whole thing and just override as necessary. And of course, we can't talk about customizations without talking about Customizer. Now, Customizer is fantastic. I love Customizer. And my immediate reaction to Customizer is customize all the things. It's super exciting, right? You can customize the layout, you can customize the navigation, you can customize colors, this and that, and you end up kind of going down this rabbit hole, right? You're like, okay, well, do you really want to customize all the things? What makes it different from custom CSS then? I did see somebody asking the questions whether or not we do custom CSS, and we actually do that here. So this was a real question for us. Where do we stop in Customizer? And where do we say, okay, this is sort of our defined limit, so that we're not just redoing custom CSS all over again. So we had a heart-to-heart with ourselves. We said, okay, what do we actually need? And three things came out of that. We said something that can keep our branding consistent. That's super important. You may have noticed that our brand guidelines back in that show and tell, they allow for a lot of different things, a lot of different voices and feelings throughout Boston University. And that's great because we're a big place and we want individual colleges to feel like a place you can feel at home at and to have their own brand and voice. But we also need something in Customizer to keep the base brand, things like our logo, protected. The second thing we came up with was different layouts for different types of content. We support a wide variety of sites with this framework, right? Everything from really, really large school sites to itty-bitty faculty, simple profile pages. I just want to show off my work portfolio types of sites. And not there's not really one navigation that satisfies all of that, right? So we want to give people some options for ways to pick different layouts to accommodate that. And then the third is preset color options that you can tweak or override completely. This is really key to making sure that everybody, even though they're on the same theme and they're on the same framework, especially these people who don't have custom themes, that they get something that looks and feels unique too. So taking a look at branding, I said that branding, one of the things that we needed to make sure was happening was that our logo and our system was protected. And you can see how this happens through the customizer. So currently we have this set to the signature type. You'll notice there's a couple of other types you can pick from, logo type or unbranded. And then underneath the options for title, parent, and subparent, you'll see some additional checkboxes. They're grayed out now because you actually can't choose these things with this type of branding. But if you were to switch it, say to logo type, watch those checkboxes down there, you now see that display BMC branding in the footer is available. Note that master plate in the footer is actually checked now, but you can't uncheck it. These types of rules are actually what protects our brand across all of these sites. So Steve wrote some wonderful and harrowing logic to make sure this all happens correctly. But you can see that as you go and as you switch to things like unbranded where you have even more options, you'll see that master plate in the footer is now available but unchecked, and BMC branding, you can't get to it anymore until you check it. The logic seems simple, but from a client standpoint, it's really, really hard to remember all of those rules and get them all correct. And from a developer standpoint, it's also really hard to make sure they all work together. So props to him for that.
Thank you.
No problem. You saw all of our layout options during the show and tell, but this is what it looks like on the back end. You see you get a little preview to the left of the various types of navigation you can choose. Anything from navigation on the top to the side to even no navigation at all if you just have a single page site. And similarly, you'll see that in terms of fonts, this is kind of where you start to see, we give you options, but not all of the options. Instead of letting you pick any fonts you want for headings and body copy, we actually pair them together so that you have just 5 simple options. You say, okay, well, which one of these overall gives the right feel to the page that I'm looking for? And that way you're not trying to necessarily design the site altogether. We're still giving you some help throughout it. Colors, just the same. You can pick a color scheme, but you can actually override individual bits of that color scheme. So you can see background color in the navigation bar is overrideable here, and same with border color and links. We label these very clearly so that you understand how they will apply across the site, especially when you get to things like, say, the sidebar, where you might not know all the CSS rules to override it. And in a custom CSS situation, it's risky to try and figure them all out and hope you've tested for them all. This customizer helps our clients so that they don't have to do all that work. But obviously we don't want to give everybody all of the options, and we want to keep ourselves sane too. So we came up with a couple of rules to help us, keep moving forward and give people these options without ruining our days every day. So the first one, as I said, custom CSS is allowed, but we do not support or maintain it. This is absolutely critical. If we supported or maintained all of the custom CSS on our sites, and there's a lot out there, a lot of people really like to do their own CSS and make their own tweaks to themes. If that was on us to test every single time we updated the framework, we would never get anywhere. It would be so hard to make progress. So we put that onus on the clients and the people using this framework and say, okay, we're about to make an update. Here's where you can see a preview, and you're going to test and fix your own CSS. For child themes, especially big school sites where we might say this is the type of branding that we think works best for you, and this is the layout that we think works best for you, we don't want those options open in the customizer anymore. So we actually do have PHP constants that restrict parts of the customizer, such as branding or layout, so that this gets preserved and so that someone down the line who might not know what's going on, if someone changes jobs or quits, can't edit those and sort of make a mess out of them after we're done. Finally, the third thing is that with custom CSS, all sites are reviewed for branding before launch. This is important so that we make sure that nobody is making a brand violation, because you can do whatever you want with custom CSS. So as far as adding features and cleaning up goes, that can be pretty intense too, right? You might remember in our slides in our history that we did this 3 different times. So that means that every time at some point we looked at what we had and we said, oh crap, we have to make some changes. We have to do something, and not like a little thing, like a whole new thing. So that can be tough, right? You got to know when to break it off.
So, with features, you have to know when to add them. What's a good point in your perceived outward future, and how do I identify which features to add? Since we use GitHub, we have one place to discuss all the bugs and features. So that makes it super simple. We also have external bug trackers that clients submit to, it's a very general one for the whole university. So when it gets triaged and it comes back to us saying it is a framework issue, then we add it to GitHub, so we then can track it there, clean it up, fix it, and then push it back out and say, okay, client, it's all set. So these are both external requests, bug fixes, feature requests, and internal pushes of feature requests that we handle. So when do you borrow and when do you rebuild? For us, it came down to a balance. We constantly are looking at ourselves and what we do and say, okay, we've built XYZ feature 3 times last year. Can that be integrated into the framework, or should that be a plugin? Or is it not universal enough where we can add it to either the framework or a plugin? And it's exploration. It's even more questions. Is there anything out there that does what we need it to do? Is there a plugin that exists? Is there functionality someone else has already tackled? Can I borrow it? Can I build upon it? Or do I have to build it from scratch? And that all depends on that exploration period when you say, what's the budget? What's the timeline? How many needs does it fill? How many users will it help? And what if you mess it up and realize there's a better way in 2 years?
Then you messed up and there's a better way in 2 years. The web's always changing, like it's fine. That's when you just roll with the punches and you say, okay, well, here's what we could be doing better. And if we never did that, we never would have made the progress that we made. Look how far we've gotten having that attitude, Exactly. Okay, so after 7 years of doing this, I can't say that I've been here 7 years doing this. I wish I could, but somebody else did all the hard work for me in the beginning, and I came on a few years ago. 7 years of framework development, you would think that you've learned a little bit from that, and we have. We've learned a lot, especially in the past couple of years with responsive. So some of these things we've learned are sweeping changes are still sweeping changes. It's going to be hard whether or not you have a framework. If you find a bug in your themes and you've built 7 different themes, you're still going to have to change that problem across 7 different themes, even if you repeat it yourself, even if you did this or that, and you'll still have to test each of those themes individually. So yeah, you can have a framework and you might have a big change that has to happen and so much testing, but at least you'll only be changing it in one place. You can use pure code reviews, pull requests, and workflows, especially in GitHub. This is our favorite place to do it, to catch the things that computers can't. So this is stuff like best practices, or is there a better way to do this in WordPress than the way I'm using now? Pure code reviews are absolutely critical for this, and pull requests are a great way to get that feedback. I know I learn a ton from code reviews, and I'm sure other people, when I code review them, learn a ton from me as well. I would say also use code climate and linters to catch the things that computers can. This is for all that nonsense coding standard stuff that you hate trying to abide by. So things like property ordering in SAS, or don't use placeholders, or make sure you use placeholders in your extends and things like that. or I'm sure you have a whole list of PHP ones that you guys have to do. That can be real tedious to check for by hand. So you want something else doing that for you. You want a computer to do that for you. And linters and Code Climate are really great for that. And finally, automate testing where you can. My favorite example of this is the screenshot testing tool that our friends over at ISNT built for us. It's really fantastic. You give it a list of URLs, say from WPCLI, and then you say, okay, go take screenshots of everything in this environment, and then go take screenshots over here. And it could be anything. We use it for all the time for WordPress upgrades, for making changes to the framework and making sure we didn't, bjork anything. It's really, really helpful. So definitely, if you can get an automated testing setup going, and I'm sure there are like real services that do this now, but someone built it for us, so we use that. I would definitely recommend that.
So, we always have that battle, right? DIYing or take something that exists. But we found that DIYing creates risky situations when things need to be updated. So you want to make sure you're not just copying things, you're not just copying things from scratch or building it yourself in a bubble. If you quit and someone else takes over, they need to be able to understand how it was built. You can't go out and copy something from Stack Overflow that you don't understand, put it in a framework, or put it in a child theme, then someone else copies that into another child theme, and you run into this issue where, where's the original source, who did this, who okayed it, where do we fix it? And we also learned that the framework is a product, not a project. You'll never be done.
Never.
But that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's absolutely a good thing. It's my favorite project to work on, but you're never done.
And if you constantly maintain it, hopefully you won't have to do giant overhauls every few years just to stay on top of industry standards.
Yeah, that's the idea. We're working on that.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
And don't try and do everything out of the gate. Work agilely.
Yeah, that's a word, right?
Figure out the minimum viable product and do that really great for version 1. Then assess and plan your features, upgrades, and add them slowly and with precision.
It's fantastic. Plus, then you get to check off your checklist for like forever. It's a really great feeling. Okay, so I'm sure that some of you are veteran framework authors and some of you are not. For those of you who aren't, I would definitely recommend looking at GitHub, Grunt, Bower, Sass, the WordPress template hierarchy especially, because that's a big part of it. And if you came into this room thinking you were going to hear from our friends at ISNT about how we use WordPress as a service and how we manage all of our WordPress installations and multi-site and stuff, I am sorry to disappoint you, but I highly recommend this fantastic video that they did at WPCampus 2016. It's a really great overview of our structure above the theme environment. Thank you for listening. We're hiring if you want to click a link.
Yes, we are.
Did we have any questions?
Yes, we did.
Excellent.
Let's pull some of those up. Okay, so first question here is, are subdirectories of bu.edu separate installs or part of a multi-site? We have a multi-network, multi-site setup. And again, that's one of those things that our friends at ISNT manage.
Mm-hmm. They do all the hard work for us. Why so many themes? Doesn't that present brand identity challenges? Can you give some examples of why custom themes have been a necessary tactic? So I touched on this a little bit when I talked about our branding and what we do in Customizer with that. Boston University is a big campus. It's a big campus in a big city with many different schools and colleges. So part of our brand guidelines is that we accommodate that. We recognize that it's really hard to be a student in such a big environment and a big city and not have a place that feels like your home, right? So in that sense, we kind of have to do a lot of different customizations and custom themes, and each school almost does have a little bit of its own brand voice. So in that sense, you know,
like the School of Business is not going to have the same branding voice that the School of Fine Arts would have. They have
Exactly.
different needs, different users. So we do need to give them flexibility where appropriate.
So that's part one. That's the branding side of that. The part two, or the development side of that, is that we get a lot of requests based on those different user needs for very special functionality. So the College of Communication is one of my favorite examples of that. We have a Pathfinder tool specifically for them and no one else, because one of their big challenges is that they're dealing in communications where a big perception is that you can't get a job after you get a degree in journalism, or there is no path for you in communications, or it's just too hard and it's not worth it. And we really wanted to disprove that using a career-oriented tool that points you towards programs and tells you exactly how that's just not a truth.
Right. So the next question is, do you allow end users to add custom CSS? And what happens when they do something horrible? Does that scale?
I definitely said we do allow customer or end users to add custom CSS. What happens when they do something horrible? It kind of depends. It depends on how horrible it is. If it's a branding violation, we definitely, we get in touch with them and we say, hey, look, you're out of line here. Like, we need you to fix this thing. And that's a part of the process that goes through when we do site launches. But there is this whole period of time where we can't police everything. And if you do custom CSS, there's a chance, and it's very real and it's very out there, that you're doing something wrong and horrible and we just don't know about it. So I'm sure there's sites out there that are doing that. We try to get to them as we can, but part of allowing custom CSS does mean that we have to give up that absolute control, and we have to be on the lookout for those things ourselves, and we may not always catch it immediately.
Okay, so why did we build our own clone tool versus, say, WP Migrate DB Pro? That I actually have no insight into. That's been around for a long time, and I would have to check with our friends at IS&T.
I thought the reason was that it was so early that there was no tool out there. I'm pretty sure that's why it was. It was like one of those legacy things that we said, we need this, but it doesn't exist out there yet.
Distinct possibility.
I think that's the answer there.
So are all those custom meta boxes built into the theme? Most of them, yes. Some of them are created via plugins or via the framework, but most of them do go into the child theme because, like Ashley said earlier, we have each college, each site has individual needs, so individual meta boxes that are pertinent to them. Let's see, next is all of the customization of the site being done in Customizer? So like we said, it's a mix. So a lot of it in Customizer, a lot of it with meta boxes, page templates, taxonomies, all the good stuff, custom post types. It's a blend, really depends on the needs of the sites. And let's see, this one is for you, Ashley. About the SAS structure. Did you consider SAS's 7-1 pattern?
I don't know. Oh, interesting. I'm looking at the 7-1 pattern now as we speak. A lot of this
something similar to this.
Yeah. This actually isn't too far out from what we do. It looks like it was our original structure was probably based on this. I'm actually taking a pretty critical look at the SAS structure right now as we're working on our next release. So I'm definitely going to look into this and see, what options it could bring us later on down the line.
Okay, that looks like the end of the question. So like we said, anytime you can reach out to us on Twitter, and we are hiring. So check out that link. I'll post it in the WPCampus, which channel was it? WP Online Slack channel.
Thanks for listening, guys. See you
Thank you.
later.